this whole colloquium germinated from a sort of informal postdoc seminar that Father Patapios, Dr. Petropoulos, and I conducted last summer on Clement. We read the entirety of the Stromatis, I believe.
A good deal of it, yeah.
And we came away with many ideas, but two major conclusions. You could subsume our ideas under two major conclusions. Number one, we were astonished by how many areas in which Clement is a pathfinder of ideas that appear in later patristic thought, both in terms of theology and spiritual life, asceticism. The second major conclusion we had was, where are all his heresies? Because we didn't see them in the Stromatis. And of course they are to be found rather in the fragments that are found in, for example, Eusebius of Caesarea, St. Photios. And I believe St. Photios was skeptical of the authenticity of some of the fragments. And for certain, some of the ideas that appear in the fragments as non-Orthodox, we found rather the opposite kind of views in Clement's Stromatis. So we came finally to the conclusion, this is a great thinker. It's a very great influence on the early church. And again, his reception in later patristic thought really needs to be explored much more, because it's there. We see hints of it here and there, more than hints of it. We see examples of it here and there. But that's a puzzle why scholarship hasn't picked up on that. So that's the context in which this whole colloquium developed. Grace?
Thank you, Father, and thank you to all of the four of you for your talks. They were all very good, and both informative and thought-provoking, in each in their own ways. So I have questions for each of you. Although my question for Dr. John and for Father Gregory is basically the same question. I'm going to direct it to Dr. John because it's his area of expertise. But first I want to start out asking you, Father Patapios, maybe the most difficult or the most theologically juicy question.
Okay.
Because you were speaking about a theologically juicy topic, essence and energies, and you were making the claim that, you can find this at least in some sort of incipient form in Clement. Correct?
I wouldn't say incipient. I think it's actually there.
Explicit. All right. So
it depends on how you understand his terminology.
Okay. So this is what I'm getting. This is what I want to get to.
Yes.
So and if I didn't hear the right words when you were speaking, please correct me.
Okay.
You said, all right. So is there anything in Clement that would prevent his statements that you quoted, for example, like we can say what God is not, we can't say what God is, these kind of apophatic style statements, that would prevent these statements from being understood in terms of a Thomistic analogy rather than as the Palamite essence energy distinction?
Oh.
Okay, because Aquinas uses the same terminology. Aquinas uses the same phraseology. Aquinas makes the same statements of we can say what God is not what God is. He uses all of these same statements. He just doesn't use the explicit terminology. He doesn't use the explicit terminology of essence energy. In fact, he would deny it because he's saying that all of these are statements of the divine essence. So my question is there anything that would preclude a Thomist from reading Clement honestly in a Thomistic sense?
I didn't see anything in what I read, and I could just be a reflection of my limited reading of Clement, that spoke about anything like a via eminentiae, which would be the pathway that Thomas would take in reading Clement to link him with Thomas's thinking on these subjects. I didn't detect anything. Of course, that could be just a reflection of a limited database, as it were, that I worked with. I was looking at parts of the Stromatis, and maybe there are some of these answers could be found more clearly by looking at the Pedagogos or other works, and just in a complete reading of the work. So I have to be honest about that. I don't feel in a position to really answer that question. But I just, based on what I saw, though, I didn't detect anything resembling the via eminentiae or anything analogy would be a kind of a pathway towards that kind of reading. I do agree that Thomas could find sources of that kind of thinking in Clement in an honest way, but I didn't detect that.
I
I
think
do you have any thoughts on it?
I do. I think it's helpful, and I believe it's Bradshaw who wrote an article on the Cappadocian roots of Palamite theology. And what he did was he looked for the deification language, the Kiosis language,
That's right.
and he said, this goes hand in hand. It's a corollary to the essence energies
Right.
distinction.
Right.
Does he
The
use the word theosis?
No, actually,
Theopesis.
Theopesis.
That's what we
Okay,
discovered. yeah.
Theopesis.
But it's just very similar.
And he talks
It
again
tends more in our
terms of-
direction.
Yeah.
Right, and in terms of synergy, he talks about.
That was my question for you, but
Okay.
I'll ask it right now. Does he use the word synergy? Does he use
Yes.
the word synergia?
Yes.
He says it as a noun or as a verb? Remember? Because St. Paul uses use it as a verb, synergundos.
Yeah, I'd have to look.
We'd have to check the text.
Have to
and
check
Yeah,
to
I
see,
have to
okay.
check the text.
Because but you were affirming that he is the first patristic witness to the idea of synergy explicitly.
That's what.
I mean, apart from
Jaeger
St.
says.
Paul.
Jaeger says he's the first to develop it in a sophisticated way.
Okay, so then the corollary to my
Go ahead. I just wanted to say, didn't really detect anything specifically of what you might call cataphatic theology as opposed to apophatic. I just find these statements, the one you mentioned, for example, which I paralleled with Plotinus in Enneads 5. I didn't see anything would speak in the opposite direction so much. This is not a time in which these terms have really been thought out very clearly. This is still a period of theology in a certain sense in the making, as Father said yesterday, and I think that's we can't expect to find all these distinctions quite so neatly observed.
Well, I guess my interest here is twofold. One is just what is the general tendency of his thought, and maybe a stronger argument that you could make would be that with respect to the Western view would be that even though his language doesn't explicitly preclude a Thomistic interpretation, nevertheless taken in the context of the rest of his body of work, his understanding of apathia, his understanding of theopesis, his understanding of synergia, etc., that it more naturally would lead towards the eventual Palamite interpretation.
That's a good way of
That's
saying
maybe
it,
one way of
yeah.
putting it. The other the other aspect is that insofar as he does use some of this terminology, or is one of the first popularizers in the context of the church, it does preclude certain later interpretations or heresies. So this would, in his language about synergia and so forth, would preclude a hard Augustinian interpretation of St. Paul. It would preclude any Calvinism and so on and so forth, right? So and that's in pretty formal terms, definitional terms, and that's not just a tendency.
Well, I just jump in there. I think with St. Paul, Father Gregory and I have a great interest in St. Paul, seeing his St. Paul as a kind of proto-hesychast, and you mentioned Hesychia more than once in your talk, and be interested to see exactly how Clement uses St. Paul, what's his interpretation of St. Paul. That would be a very good research project.
We've gotten about 20 research
Well, we
papers.
have many research projects coming out from this.
People have neglected poor Clement.
They have so much.
Really
yeah,
have.
yeah.
Everything goes back to Origen.
But he's so biblical.
But,
I mean, we
but
found
a lot of it goes back
yeah,
to Clement.
Yeah, but didn't we find he's so scriptural?
Very,
And he's constantly quoting Holy Scripture, but Old and New Testament, not
swims in the Scriptures.
Absolutely.
And ancient Greek.
And ancient thought too. Yeah.
Uh,
He weaves them together in a way that's it's remarkable.
By the way,
Really
what,
remarkable.
how close does Aquinas get to a concept of deification?
Yes, that's
He will accept the word in a bare sense, and from my point of view, he explains it away.
Uh-huh.
The beatific vision would be
Yeah.
considered deification. That's what modern Roman Catholics consider it to be.
Right.
And in fairness, there is some. It's not entirely alien, but it's certainly not. But because it is an intellectual contemplation rather than a holistic participation, as
Yeah.
in the Orthodox sense,
Yeah.
and because the grace is super additum, rather than our understanding of our nature being created,
Yeah.
to be in God, to be deified, the end result is much more tenuous. Certainly seems like an inferior form of relationship. Now, I'll just say one more thing to you, Father, and then I'll pass the buck around, unless you want me to continue asking questions to everyone. So I guess one continuing this line of thought,
Yes.
with how is Aquinas interpreting these early fathers, the Eastern fathers in particular, that that speak in ways that are characteristic of Orthodox language, even if by some torturous route you can extract scholasticism out of them. I guess how much of the problem, from the Orthodox point of view, is I could say Aquinas simply explaining away the natural thrust of the language of the Eastern Fathers, which he does most notably with Dionysius, in which he just totally misses the point, as far as I'm concerned, of what apophaticism really is, and what the names of God really are. He gets about halfway, but I think he fundamentally misinterprets them. He also misinterprets St. John of Damascus on a couple of points. But I can say not on such a radical level as he misinterprets St. Dionysius, in particular with the whole question of apophaticism, of naming of God, of our language of God, of propositional knowledge of God versus participation in God, analogy of being, actus purus, all of this whole package, basically, right?
Yes. Yeah.
My view in this regard is that Aquinas simply misinterprets, or rather, he has to cram them into this Augustinian Boethian box, Boethian Aristotelian box that they'd set themselves up in, as Bradshaw elaborates in his book. That they just didn't have the concept of energy available to them in the way that the East did.
He does talk about operatio, doesn't he? Do you think he means something different from?
Yeah.
Because that's why I had the caveat in my talk about using the word operation to translate energia.
No, you were right.
I don't
agree
like
with you.
this at all.
I agree with you.
Even if you want to say it's just a Western term, but it has so much tied in with it that it's not really consistent with the ethos of the patristic writings, I think.
So my question here would be, do you, my view on this, and I think maybe a standard Orthodox view on this, is that Aquinas simply misinterprets Dionysius in this. Do you think, were Thomas to read Clement, I don't even, we don't even know if he had whatever was in Latin at that time, if he ever even came across it.
I doubt it.
Would he be, if Thomas were to read Clement and were to claim his doctrine of analogy and so forth from Clement, to what extent would he be just reading him wrong?
I think he would be misreading the same way that you say he's misreading Dionysius.
But with Dionysius, I would claim that he's not just misreading the spirit; he's misreading the letter too.
The letter. Wow.
He's misreading the whole thing.
I'm not sure what Aquinas would have made of someone like Clement. He would have been bewildered by the way he writes.
Too random. Oh my
too
goodness,
random. It's not
driven him nuts.
It would have driven him crazy, I think. But I do not detect anything of the analogy of being in Clement. I wasn't looking for it necessarily, but I think it would be useful to take that as a kind of rubric or prism for which to view Clement's writing. See if we can find because it's much more needs to be said about the differences in the East and Western approaches to this whole issue of apophatic, cataphatic theology, and Father Hagiogrēgoritēs is certainly enlightened all of us about this in his various lectures on dogmatic theology. But I'd like to take it a lot further, and because there's a lot of talk about it now, many books coming out about this. It's obviously an area of great interest. I think a lot of people in the West are sympathetic to the idea of apophatic theology, but they want to do it within their own terms, and I think that's why we need to be very careful how we use this terminology.
Well, I've noticed. I mean, in the courses that I'm taking, there is a deliberate attempt to basically to soften all of the hard edges of scholasticism, of Thomism, hard edges by which I mean those things which we criticize them for.
Oh, I see.
But without accepting the Orthodox framing or the Orthodox terminology, right? They're still sticking with their framing of it, their terminology of it, and so forth. But they're trying to soften the edges. I assume part of it is because of a little bit of cultural milieu. That the culture is a little less sympathetic to religion as proposition and a little more sympathetic to religion as experience.
Yes.
And part of it is maybe in response to the heavy and sustained Orthodox criticism of these ideas, for the past more than half century, 80 years or so.
Easily,
All right. All right. Thank you, Father. I say I have more questions, but if somebody else wants to continue the line here,
maybe we can alternate.
Yeah, sure.
The audience with your...
No, the audience is not supposed to. This is just us.
This is just us.
It's just us.
The audience is just observing.
They're just observing us talking amongst ourselves.
Oh.
I was kind of interested to see what Father Hagiogrēgoritēs had.
Well, Father Hagiogrēgoritēs is supposed to participate, but
he was a respondent.
But we want Father Hagiogrēgoritēs should probably be sitting in this chair.
Yeah, indeed.
Because he's the one with the degree, and he's the chief theologian.
By the way, I don't know the word apophatiki or the other term cataphatiki is used in Clement. I don't think those terms are actually used. It's just this is my interpretation of what I read.
Right.
But I don't think that's. I'm not sure who was the first writer to talk about apophatiki theologia or the reason.
Apophasis.
Apophasis as opposed to cataphasis.
Apophasis, cataphasis.
Wouldn't be an adjective.
Saint Gregory the theologian uses those terms, I believe.
Oh,
not.
Look at Lampe.
Look at Lampe. Yeah.
Yeah.
What he says.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you, Grace.
Well, I say if we want to go in a circle, then you can.
And if I may, then is there anyone else have?
Not right away. No, go ahead.
I think you could.
If you don't, then I'm going to continue here.
Continue.
Okay. Dr. John. All right. So this is just a very technical question. Both you and Father Gregory mentioned the enormous number of citation of classical literature, and you actually corrected his number and bumped it up, didn't you? You bumped up his number.
Well, I may have.
I did.
I mean, Jane Heath, in her book of 220, Cambridge University Press, has come up with a new figure, I take it, and she said, did I not say 400?
Yeah,
Yeah, he was
Which-
he was at 3.
I was citing a
And-
historian named Ferguson who was writing the
Yeah.
1974.
Right.
Oh,
So-
so
Yeah.
since then.
So Jane
Yeah.
Heath has come up with a lot
400.
a lot more.
So
And it just shows the profundity of his Greek paideia, his Greek training.
So my question here is that I didn't understand. Are these citations here, are they being counted in within the context of all of his extant works? And I'm not sure if the fragments count for that or not, but that's not
No, she's talking only about Stromates.
only in Stromates.
Oh,
Okay.
Yes, in
So the
Stromates
that
alone.
that
Yes.
400 is that counted per quote, per book, or per author? In other words, how many different authors does he cite? How many different specific works
right.
does he cite?
Of those, half are Plato.
Half are Plato.
Right. And I would wager that about at least 30% are Euripides, Menander.
Yes.
Well,
Euripides.
in mine I found
Yeah.
plenty of quotes from Aristotle.
And Aristotle, of course, yes, amongst philosophers, yes.
But
yes.
less Aristotle than Plato, I think.
Yeah, but
So it
there
would be
quite a bit of
Aristotle.
Aristotle. Quite a bit of
So
Aristotle.
maybe more than we think then.
More than whoever was talking about.
Well,
Who was mentioning this? Somebody was questioning how much Aristotle he used. Who was that?
Could have been I.
not I, no.
Well, whoever was questioning how much Aristotle he used, I was thinking to myself when I heard that it was more than might be thought. He was
Okay.
he was not an Aristotelian per se.
True. True.
He was quite Platonist and he was quite Stoic. But this, what you were saying about Middle
But-
Platonism.
No, but you see, I
Yeah.
think in Book 5, for instance, which is about, as you talked about, faith and is it not, and knowledge, he actually doesn't really use Aristotle per se, but an intermediary. It seems that he's preserved a lot of Antiochus of Ascalon.
Oh, yes.
That's what the specialists say, it's not me. So he uses a lot of peripatetic material, Antiochus, but he uses a lot of Aristotle.
He does.
I can look it up in Jane's book, Jane
Yeah.
Heath's book. She may have an Index Philochorum and see how much Aristotle. But people have been able, experts have been able to piece together Ascalon, Demetrius Antiochus of Ascalon, especially in Book 5.
Yes.
He seems to rely on the Antiochus as an intermediary in his theory of knowledge and faith.
Kind of a filter for Aristotle.
Yeah.
He's the filter for
Like you say,
Aristotle.
but
Yeah.
I don't think it's an unfaithful filter. In other words, I think
No.
that he is accurately representing
right.
Aristotle's
Oh,
views
yes,
on
yes,
these matters.
yes, yeah. Yeah.
So
So there is a lot of Aristotle. Yes.
So I guess what I'm just wondering kind of just for personal curiosity, I guess, is how many different ancient authors does he cite? Which would be, which would be another standard by which we could judge the breadth of his knowledge, his education.
Right.
Or how many different books.
I mean, he's interested in Xenophanes for obvious reasons.
Oh, yes. And
Monism.
He's interested in everything.
He's interested
In
everything. And
yes.
he will extract, I'm just talking about the Stromates, he will extract whatever he can out of unpromising material, such as the Cyclops episode in the Odyssey. He will detect adumbrations of the Holy Trinity
Yes.
in a monster's cave, in Cyclops' cave.
I noticed he quotes Empedocles. I was surprised because he seemed so
yes.
antithetical to what Clement
Yes.
said, but he's able to find
Solon.
something in Empedocles.
Solon.
Solon.
Solon also.
Absolutely, yeah.
Some of the orators, like
Yes.
Demosthenes. So he's truly, if I may say, ecumenical. He's
Yeah.
an ecumenical
Oh, yeah.
scholar.
And you can find positive things, say, in Euripides, as
positive
well as
things.
negative things.
I mean,
He's very,
his motto is choose the best of
Yeah,
ancient
sure.
tradition
Yeah.
and use it.
So I would like to propose two propositions to all of you, and I
Yeah.
want to see how you
Mhm.
accept these. All right. So the less complicated but the more grandiose proposition is that, for me at least, Clement has a good claim to be the founder of Western civilization as such.
Mm.
How? In what sense do I mean
Wow.
this?
Yeah.
Because he was the first true synthesizer of the ancient Greek culture with the biblical Christian tradition. And that synthesis is basically what lies at the base of the West, of Western culture.
Yeah.
So,
Actually, yes.
I-
Werner Jäger says that about the Cappadocians, and even before
Yeah.
the Cappadocians, Clement. I think that's.
How about St. Justin
And-
Martyr?
but
Well-
he didn't do
But-
any the specifics.
Your point is extreme
you're right.
is valid.
Absolutely.
That he's really
Yeah.
by elevating Jesus to a pedagogos, he is introducing paideia writ large as
Yes.
education cum culture and so forth. So this is a new culture. It's an invitation to
That's
A new
Western.
culture,
Yes,
yes.
exactly.
As you say,
and
Western.
somebody was asking. Was it Seraphim or somebody was asking about? Is this a cultural project that he's doing? Somebody asked
Yes,
that
yes.
question, right?
Yeah.
And for me, the answer is
Oh,
very
yes.
definitive. Yes,
Yes.
because he doesn't. His quotes are. It's not just on the level of philosophy. He's not just integrating Greek philosophy with Christian theology, right? He's integrating the whole of ancient Greek culture
Yes,
That's it.
exactly.
into
You-
the creation of a
that-
Christian culture.
Right. Right.
That is what he's doing. It's a
That's right.
a major
Which is a bigger
cultural-
project.
It's a
Much bigger.
cultural project.
Yes,
It's
absolutely.
something, he's
And we tend to concentrate on his use of Greek philosophy. That's what I find, what I've read, but not as much do people really explore how he uses the tragedians, for example.
Yeah.
You can have many fragments of the tragedians, which are probably
Exactly.
not available anywhere else.
Right.
And think about him as also a preserver of the pre-Socratic thought,
Oh.
immensely important. That's been well covered.
Yeah.
But as a preserver of classical culture and the literature and so on,
Yes.
that interaction with that whole culture is often glossed over in favor of philosophy. It's a bit
Right.
one-sided, I think. So I think what you're saying is extremely important
Yeah.
to Grace. I totally agree with you.
Yeah. No, he is
Absolutely.
proposing a model for civilization.
Yeah, exactly. And we need
He-
that. We need
yes.
that very much.
I mean, the man who is civilized will be a Christian, gentleman or
Yeah.
gentlewoman,
Yeah.
as it were.
Yes.
That's what he.
Yeah.
That's what he proposes.
Kalos kagathos in the Christian.
Kalos kagathos in the Christian.
Kagathos.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
may I just say that in
Yeah.
my line of business, as it were, in classics, everyone has dealt with Clement, but not from our point of view,
No.
but because he preserves so much of Greek literature.
Oh, yeah.
Otherwise,
Absolutely.
which otherwise would have been unknown.
Exactly.
So he's. Or
Okay.
if it's known, you can,
Yeah.
collate it against him and see
Yeah.
that his version of Plato is a little different from so and so. So he's a gold mine. He's
Yeah.
a treasure trove for classics.
All right. Well, I'm glad that resonates.
But your point
very
is
much so.
entirely valid. That he's coming up with a new culture, and
Yep.
he has actually given us a blueprint.
That's
Yeah.
yes.
No, I think
By
that
the year 200.
I think that the Cappadocians and so forth, did more of it and better and so forth.
Right.
They integrated the synthesis, more.
Yeah.
But he was the trailblazer.
Yeah, and it's not accidental that he was in Alexandria, the
No, it was not
cosmopolitan city
accidental.
par excellence,
Exactly.
you see. And he's open to everything, really, but he says, let's be discriminating. Let's take the best.
Well, what was interesting, you remember Origins that says that we take from all of the philosophers except the Epicureans.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
Clement quotes from the Epicureans,
Yes.
positively.
Yes,
that's an
you
interesting
could, but
aspect of it. Yes.
But he also says St. Paul warns, I forgot where, against bad philosophy. or,
Yes.
you
Very
know,
much so.
No,
Bad
he
absolutely.
criticizes the Epicureans, but then he
But
quotes
everyone did,
them.
Yeah.
I can say he quotes the Epicureans positively to prove a point. So he was not against even mining the Epicureans
No.
for if they happen to stumble upon some
Exactly.
truth.
Oh, he's entirely open-minded.
I wonder if he
entirely
quotes
open-minded.
Lathe Viosas from Epicurus.
Yes.
It'd be does he quote it?
He-
I'd like to see if he does,
think
because that would be
does, but
interesting. It's a wonderful
Yeah.
phrase from Epicurus. Live as
Yeah.
if you're not being seen. I mean, live a
Right.
quiet,
Yeah. I mean,
reclusive life. Don't be in the spotlight.
Yeah.
That's a very good maxim.
I should
I
be
like-
interested to see if he uses apatheia in the Epicurean sense also.
Oh,
Ataraxia.
Yeah.
Yeah, kind of.
Ataraxia.
Yeah,
ataraxia,
yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
You know, if that is
Absolutely.
entered into his. Yeah,
Mhm.
but,
So following up on that, then the I agree. He's very open-minded. Like I said, but that like I said, not so open-minded that his brain falls out.
Yeah.
You know, he's orthodox, and his intention is orthodox. And you, Doctor, you made that quote of the there's one way, but many rivers that feed into it.
Yeah.
And I can say there's a danger, I think, where some people might be worried that this could be going in the direction of something like the philosophia perennis, some sort of relativism here, or some sort of, the truth is the lowest common denominator of all religions, that kind of idea, or the only truth that counts, rather. Which I don't think that Clement is saying.
No.
In the because he does, as you were pointing out, he does have a very exhaustive list of possibilities for the origin of
That's
truth
right.
as expressed by the Greeks, which I want to get that list from you.
Yeah, I can give it to you.
All right, thank you. And but so maybe more dangerously, I wanted to propose the idea speculatively and conjecturally, not dogmatically, as St. Maximus says, when he's covering his bases, that in our modern times, in our modern culture, we have to deal with the question of pluralism, and frequently that it is dealt with poorly, and poorly can mean one of two directions. Poorly can mean a kind of narrow-minded obscurantist fanaticism that simply rejects goodness or truth outside of one's own little group, and we're not immune to that temptation. Or, contrary-wise, it can mean a complete relativism, a watering down of religion, of truth, of tradition, and with many of the slogans that we hear today of it doesn't matter what you believe as long as you're sincere, and all religions are just expressing partial aspects of the truth that nobody can know completely. All these types of things.
Yeah.
And I do think that Clement, whether his model is, and I do think he has a model, whether his model is the best one or not, I do think that he avoids both of those extremes.
Yes.
And I think it's precisely through the idea of the logos. The logos is the thread that unites, that passes through. The logos, I think, is the odos. Actually, he says so. I mean, Christ says so in the
Well, that's
gospel.
true.
But I can say, the idea of the spermatikologium,
Yes.
right? The seminal reasons, as they're sometimes called, which is not a useful translation in English. The seeds of reason, to be found among all the peoples of the earth, or among all men, by virtue of being created in the image and likeness of God, and as St. Maximus says, connected specifically with the Logos, who is the or Logos ton Logon, the principle of all the principles of being, by which any truth and any goodness and beauty is always must, by definition, have its locus in the Logos. No pun intended there.
No.
And so this is a model, and whichever of the versions of explanations that you want to accept, all of these kata syndichian, kata kinon logon, kata whatever he gives. I remember there's a couple other ones that I think that I'm not sure if you mentioned as well, where the demons are forced to say the truth, and so forth. But
accident, coincidence, through their participation in nature,
right?
You see. And he quotes St. Paul on the Gentiles have the Torah written in them, right?
Right, the law.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah,
the law. Yes.
So I can say, I think that this model is a useful model for us today, and I think this is perhaps another point in which we can say that there is something that is present in a number of early fathers. The idea of the spermatiki logia is common among early apologists and so forth. Justin Martyr talks about it. Eusebius has a whole book about it. But Clement really goes into a lot of detail.
Right.
Much of what he's writing is on that theme in one way or another. It was a theme that, as society, as the empire became Christianized, it wasn't much of an issue anymore. It wasn't something that people had to think about actively, and it seems to have fallen by the wayside a little bit in the course of later Orthodox history. And so I'm wondering now that we live in a international pluralized world, globalization, in which all ideas are all piled one on top of another. People get confused and they don't have very good sorting mechanisms, and it's easy to fall one way or the other. I'm wondering if, just as I had proposed yesterday, that Clement's epistemology, which was, again, fell into abeyance, desuetude over the centuries, and yet I believe very justly is relevant and applicable to our modern circumstances. If something similar would not be also the case for his doctrine of the spermatiki logi, and the logos as the uniting principle by which we can appreciate that there is value and truth and goodness outside of the church, and profit from that, while at the same time understanding, what is the principle of the truth, and what those boundaries are.
Well, I think he gives as Dr. John says, a blueprint, because it's not a criticism on my part here of the later patristic writers, but they, for a variety of reasons, as I think you already indicated, they had much less incentive to reckon with classical culture, because it had since been overcome, been transformed and baptized by the time we get to the late 4th century and following centuries. Less reason for having that kind of interchange. But St. Clement, the Venerable Clement, Honourable Clement,
The great Clement.
The great
esteemed Clement,
The Nobel laureate.
right, there we go, gives us a model or a path by which we could perhaps interact with our own culture, and maybe gives us a kind of a an ideal we could look to? I don't know. I think there's a lot of mileage in that.
Or if not an ideal, at least a starting point.
A starting point, yes, exactly.
I mean, I would say that in the synthesis of ancient Greek culture, I would look towards maybe the Cappadocians and so forth as
certainly,
closer to the ideal, but he would certainly be the starting point.
St. Gregory the Theologian's poetry.
Oh yes, that's right.
For me, Saint Gregory the Theologian is the ideal
Yeah, I think you're right.
for the synthesis.
Yes. Yes. Well, St.
I
Basil.
mean, yes, but Saint Basil doesn't include other aspects of Greek culture, like Saint Gregory does. He doesn't. He's not a poet.
It's true.
Because remember, I wasn't just talking. We were talking about all of culture, including literature, not just the philosophy and theology.
Well, St. Basil, of course, is replete with classical. He's a charter for and that work
Exactly.
Dr. John and I have been. Dr. John primarily has been working on this. Is of course the blueprint too.
Oh, yeah.
That's
It's
that's
the
true.
Magna
That's really
Carta.
extensive.
That's another.
It's an extension of Clement. And
It is an extension of.
It's really
Clement.
it belongs along the same
yeah.
kind of the same area.
It's part of the same project.
Yeah.
It's
Project,
part of the project.
yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, exactly.
But Saint Basil, to the best of my knowledge, please correct me. Maybe Father Gurgi knows better. I don't remember that Saint Basil uses the phrase spermatiki logi in this context.
Not in the.
Not
in the address. we're
not
working
in this.
on.
No, not in. No, I don't
No,
think
nothing
so.
about spermatiki logi.
I don't think so.
No, but he does say something to that effect. I think you could tease it out rather easily. What does he say, Father? But
No,
he
I just had another thought because in another class that Matthew Ferns and I are teaching, we've been studying the work of Alistair MacIntyre, who was proposed a few months ago at the age of 95, 96, a remarkable figure after virtue, and some of the other writings that stem from that. And his critique, of course, is of what he calls the Enlightenment project, and also everything that came out of that. But he wants to get us back to the Aristotelian Thomistic axis. But why can we go back to use Clement and the Greek fathers? I've been asking the question in our class, how do we as Orthodox
yes.
respond to this?
Yeah.
Are we going to just go back to Thomas? No, obviously not
Right.
Thomas, because he's not an Orthodox writer. So what
Oh.
are we going to go back to? Well, St. Gregory and the Hesychastic tradition and
Right.
the Cappadocians, and
Yeah.
now we'll say Clement and the apologists,
yeah,
because
yeah.
that's our heritage and that's our answer.
Right.
The patristic project that you're detecting in Clement and St. Basil,
Yeah.
that's what we should be looking to. If we're going to not to criticize MacIntyre, his ideas are very good, very salutary, but how do we as Orthodox
Right.
appropriate that, and
Exactly.
what do we make of this? Obviously, not going to go back to Aquinas. We're going to go back even further. We're going to go further east and further back in time.
Yes.
And Clement doesn't feel like someone totally remote from us. He's not saying he's a contemporary, but he could be seen as an ally for us.
Oh, yes.
In a situation we experience of, as you say, pluralism and globalism,
Yes.
all these other things. There's a lot of
And also,
Food for
I'm
thought
sorry
Yeah,
to
so-
interject, but
yeah.
I like the notion of ally, and here I'm just going to
Yeah.
paraphrase
yeah.
the late Bishop Kallistos,
Mhm.
that he's an ally for missionaries, Clement is. The whole notion of
Oh.
the Logos and different cultures. You know,
Yes.
he mentions, Kallistos mentioned the Alaskans, the
Yes,
Eskimo,
that's right.
right, in that
Yeah.
famous article of his,
Mhm,
you know, that Saint Innocent
Yeah.
found that there was common ground,
Yeah.
just as St. Paul did, and
Yeah, to
so-
agnosto theo,
Yeah.
there's
Oh
always a connection that can
yeah.
that
Right.
can be made,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that connection is because of the logos, because of human
the,
nature.
the
and, you know,
Logos.
it's-
Yeah,
it cannot be erased.
right.
It can be obscured,
Yeah.
distorted, but
Yeah,
not
so
erased.
But what I have a question for you, Grace, or anyone else on the panel. It's one of my hobby horses, but I'm very much a supporter of the idea of the quote, great books approach to learning. But the great books do not include Clement.
I think there's a reason for that.
Do you know why?
Yeah, it's because most of what he said was said better by the later authors. Because he's the first one, he said it in the most, inchoate and somewhat disorganized fashion. It wasn't as processed or refined as what we find in some of the later authors. That would be the technical, my technical explanation. Of course, there's arguments from historical contingency.
Oh yeah.
Our proposed Philokalia of Clement would solve that problem.
Yes, it would go some way towards that.
Thematically arranged.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and part of that thematology would include the culture. I mean, that wasn't what we were thinking of primarily, but that could be probably a separate approach.
Well, here's an idea that you just gave me an idea, Father.
Yeah.
So it was among the rhetorical exercises that were assigned in antiquity. You had epitome, you had metaphrasis, and you had paraphrasis. And so we have, even in the Philokalia, we have paraphrases of earlier authors.
That's right.
So we have the paraphrase of St. Macarius.
Right.
And basically, it's rewriting the work in a little bit more organized fashion, with a little bit maybe better Greek, according to certain standards.
Oh yes, that's true.
And so I wonder if there would not be place for an exercise in paraphrasis with regards to Clement, with regards maybe to the Stormatis, which is his most important work as far as I'm concerned.
Sure.
To basically to take it and to in his spirit, as if it were from himself, the paraphrasis, to rephrase it in such a way that it becomes, more organized, more streamlined, more intelligible, less chaotic, a more logical sequence of ideas.
He's a daunting author to read. That's one reason I asked Father Gregory, or invited Father Gregory to read Clement with me, because I was bewildered by how much there was in Clement. It's hard to know exactly where to look to find what you want to, particular themes you want to expound. So a thematic approach, as in our proposed Philokalia of Clement, that more theological version of Clement. But this will be very useful, because it's for the average reader, Clement is kind of intimidating in some ways, because he does tend to ramble at times.
You are right about the the Erdmann's translation.
It's very, very misleading.
I regret in my presentation that I gave in Rome, I used the Erdmann translation in all of my citations. And when I was listening to the recording, I heard how those citations sounded when they were being spoken out loud. And they were so turgid and not easy to follow. Now, even when I was doing that, I had the Greek text, and I was checking to make sure that it was accurate, because when we're working with technical philosophical terminology, you really need to go back to the original text, otherwise you don't know if you're inventing something. But
or hallucinating.
Hallucinating, fantasizing, imposing your own ideas onto it, so forth. But well, first of all, we need a new translation of Clement in English.
I was going to say that I feel it's a very again daunting prospect, but I think we need it, because one thing we discovered when we read Clement was that the English translation was almost completely bereft of any references to Philo, which he borrows extensively from. You don't realize until you look at the German edition, the Berlin edition, which has tracked all these quotations. An English reader should have access to a version of Clement which indicates what he's quoting, Plato or Euripides or whoever it might be, or or the biblical quotations, which are legion.
The strength
Some-
of German scholarship.
That's the strength of yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And we could use the resources we have from the German and French scholarship, which is also very good now, and
Yes.
in the Italian, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But to generate a good translation into more vivid English. John Ferguson's translation is vivid, but it's not very accurate. Sometimes it's not. It wasn't orthodox. He was a Christian writer, but it wasn't orthodox and
Right.
very sincere and very.
But to
but
make it
not-
practical for students.
Well, yeah, but that's the whole Philokalia,
really,
right?
Yeah, the thematic
The
approach
paraphrasis
is really
that we're talking about.
helpful, I think.
But eventually, we come back to work towards something like this because Clement is not properly represented in English, and it's not just the Stromatism. The Pedagogos is important too. Shall a rich man be saved? And of course, the Exit Triptychos, which is a very rich source for classical. I mean, we do have it's something to aim for in the future, but I think right now a stepping stone will be a more modest project that Father and I have in
Yes,
mind, a
you should.
more practical thing. I have to generate a kind of Philokalia, as it were, or even an early version of that for my students in Patristics 1. I
Well,
need to have
if
something
it's of
like
any
that,
assistance,
you know.
Father,
You know.
I began to compile a list of patristic site quotes, extensive ones, on the topic of epistemology.
Oh, really?
And
Yeah.
all I got through was Clement and
Oh.
maybe half of Saint Basil.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
But I do
Yeah.
have all of the quotes of Clement on epistemology that I thought were relevant, at least to my concerns. So if you would like to have those quotes for
I would be very grateful for that.
inclusion,
Yes, certainly.
I can give them to you.
Certainly.
When I heard how those citations sounded, and then there was the possibility, which I rejected, but of having to give that whole talk all over again here. What I would have wanted to do would be at least to edit those quotes, to do a retranslation of them so that they were more intelligible.
Well, when I quoted, I was using the same translation, but I modified it in certain places just to reflect the Orthodox emphasis. And that's part of the problem with trying to detect language of essence and energies is precisely because it doesn't use those terms, and the older translations are by people who didn't understand anything about the apophatic tradition or the essence energies, or St. Gregory Palamas, all he summed up. They had no concept of that at all, so they couldn't detect it. And it's the same problem you have with translations of St. Basil, and I found also, actually two particular works by St. Basil on the Holy Spirit, and on Against Eunomius. The translations that are available now are very good, they're very lively, but they do not indicate any awareness of the use of the essence energies distinction, any of its forms. It's completely,
you mentioned dynamis, power.
well, dynamis,
Right.
yes.
That's.
Now,
You know that book by Patrick Barnes?
Michel Barnes.
Yeah, the dynamis, the power of God,
I've
in
read
St.
it, but
Gregory of Nyssa.
I've heard of it, but yeah, St. Gregory of Nyssa, right? Yeah,
Which the idea is that
yeah.
the early Cappadocian fathers are using the word dynamis in some of the same sense that later on the fathers are going to use energia. I mean, that's part of the dyad of
Yeah.
dynamis energia, right, in Aristotle.
I think it would be fair to say we have to be a little cautious and not to read too much into certain terms. We have this certain degree of circumspection is needed when dealing with even early uses of energia. I think you mentioned actually it's Father Alexis Torrance's article on the Cappadocian roots of
Oh, is that
Palamite
right?
thought. Yeah, but it's a very good article.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
it's
I thought it
missing
was
certain
Bradshaw.
important passages and also is overly cautious. But
it is
sometimes
overly cautious.
be more
but
restrained is fine.
The approach is a good one. I
But it's a good idea though. We should be.
focus on deification language.
We should.
We,
Yeah.
you know,
Truly,
remember in
yeah.
Patristics 2, we came up with a whole list of ciphers for
Oh,
deification.
you're right, Father.
Because
You're right.
there's so
Really?
many.
I think
Oh
to
yeah,
see
no,
that.
Father Gregory. You
I
have
mean, we
all
know
that
we
written, yeah.
know glorification and but
Sanctification.
Sanctification, filiation,
filiation,
Yes.
Filiation,
Filiation.
yeah, and participation. I think.
participation,
right?
These are all in the same ballpark. Is it
theosis,
right? Yeah.
theopesis,
Right.
What else have you come up with?
If you haven't written down, please
Well,
communicate
speaking of,
those. That'd be
Dr. John, can you give me the list, and maybe everyone can hear it, of the
Ah.
modes, the modes.
Okay, it's Book 1, 94-7. By accident or by coincidence, or through their grasp of nature, or because they possess the common human mind, or they reflect the truth as if through water. That's Plato who uses that term.
Oh,
It's
Okay,
not-
so in
so it's 194-7.
194.7. Okay, and
Yeah.
if you can
And-
just say those, if you can just read those in
So
Greek, how are they?
in Greek. I must find it again.
If I might just interject, this is another problem. Reading Clement and scholarship on Clement nowadays, everyone is referring to the Berlin edition, which has everything broken down in terms not just of chapters, but of sections, and that's what they're often referring to. It could be hard finding a way around Clement. But and English translations are not always, with the Erdmanns, there's no,
I had problems
impossible to find a way.
correlating them as well. Yeah,
it's just absolutely impossible.
yeah.
Because these are modern editorial conventions which make it easier to negotiate the text.
Right.
But an English translation of Clement would have to be based upon that edition with all this section and then subsections. You've got the chapter, section, subsection.
Which edition is that?
The Berlin Academy.
When was that done?
Oh, that started in the 1900s and it was, I think, went up to the 1930s or 40s. Mostly done, I think, before the Second World War.
It does. Does that
It's a
does
very
that
good-
have it with anything like Becker numbers?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
For,
easy to.
for citation, exact citation.
Oh, all very
Yeah.
exact citations. Yeah.
Okay.
Very, very exact.
So
Good Teutonic
I
scholarship.
can give you the Greek, not the full quotation, because I paraphrased, but by an accident is kataperiptosin,
Kataperiptosin, right? Okay, I've got that one. Kataperiptosin.
which was occasioned by divine dispensation, thea economia. That's the first case.
Well, economy.
Yeah.
I-
Oh,
Well,
is this the first use of the term?
his use of economia is also interesting. We should keep that in mind when reading, because the translations also obscure that, because they don't understand the whole idea of theologia as opposed to economia.
Right.
In the 19th century, these Anglican translators had no concept at all. Well, very little concept of it.
Right.
So, but we as Orthodox are sensitive to those nuances. We would
But
see
this,
that.
this
you know.
economia is in the sense of
Although it's not-
permission, by the permission and dispensation
Probably-
of
no,
God,
you're right.
as part of His providence. for
Divine
mankind.
permission.
Divine
yeah.
dispensation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
Okay,
No?
so kataperiptosin.
Yeah.
So number 2, by a happy coincidence, katasindichian,
Katasindichia.
katasuntukian,
Yes.
arranged by pronia, I think, by providence. Third, through the innate notion of natural law, physiki enia, that's the third, instilled in them by God their creator. Fourth, by virtue of the common mind, kinos nous,
Oh.
with which their father endowed them. 5, owing to the divine element in them, to theon.
Well.
Katatothion, it says, or
I have to look up the Greek.
Okay,
Yeah, but he uses the term to theon or to theon, the divine element. And finally, the least flattering, the Greeks acquired philosophy by stealing it,
by stealing.
Oh.
yeah.
like
That's true, yeah.
Prometheus.
Yeah.
And then they sometimes very arbitrarily defaced it and twisted it out of shape. And so
Right.
the stolen property, they misused it. So that's what he says.
Because I remember there's another section where he talks about something similar, but with respect to
Angels?
angels, the
Okay.
demons.
Yes, that's another which I didn't mention. It's also perhaps a bit problematic, but he says that angels stole it and inspired it or instilled it in the Greeks. But the truth.
Right,
I think
like
generally
that the demons inspired the Greeks, but they inspired them with the truth
The
because they couldn't escape the truth.
right.
Ah.
But even when the Greeks expressed the truth, it was partially,
right, right.
Of course,
and kataperifrasin, he says, just
Yeah.
in a roundabout fashion, and very obscurely. They never.
Yeah.
But anyway, yes, another conduit would have been angels, and I have that reference. I omitted it by accident. Katasindihian.
Actually, I want to.
That is 181:4. Some angel, some power, perhaps he uses the term daimon, learnt a portion of the truth, stole this, and taught this to human beings through inspiration.
So now that is
Isn't it?
that is a very curious idea. That makes you wonder, and how. First of all, whether it's true in any sense, and then secondly, whether it can be extended to other situations. I would be thinking of, say, Buddhism.
Yeah.
For example, does the demons inspiring, which could account on this level, it could account for something like a mystical experience. It could account for some of the more religious tendencies within Greek philosophy. Which are more difficult to account for, purely by the logos, by a rational account. And I don't think anybody is going to deny the religious aspect of ancient Greek philosophy.
No.
And still less of Indian philosophy, which is even more overtly spiritual.
Yeah.
This and maybe I'm just thinking of this now. Clement, living in that era where this was all live, would have been more attuned or more concerned with the spiritual aspect of Greek philosophy.
Yeah.
Than we today are thinking of it mostly in academic terms.
Yeah.
So I wonder. So this idea of Clement is not quite as crazy as it sounds. I'm not saying that I advocate for it. I'm just sort of thinking off the top of my head that if you were to posit the idea of inspiration by demons, but that necessarily includes the truth, because they cannot escape from the truth, because the truth is the basis of, you cannot have a lie without having the truth. Previous to it, you cannot have evil without having good, and so forth. So that might be a possible explanation for some of the apparent mystical or spiritual dimensions. I don't know, this is a pure hypothesis.
In spite of themselves, the demons sowed something, and they couldn't really control it. So people with innate consciousness of truth and a desire for truth would have been able to take even those distorted.
Well, there's also the idea that God forces the demons to say the truth.
Right.
We find that
Certainly.
in some of the lives of the saints.
Yes.
Where it says the demon was constrained to confess the truth.
St. Andrew, a fool for Christ, had an interview with a demon and said, "Well, what sins do your people like most?" And so they had that ability to, to force them to speak the truth, as you say.
So then that's another kind of permutation on it, which is that the demons inspire the non-Christian philosophers, but God forces the demons to tell the truth.
That's a very interesting thought. Interesting. Well, Greg, you've been kind of
Yes.
quiet. Let's
Actually, what I've been thinking
jump
this
in
whole
here,
discussion,
please.
I haven't had a chance to watch your entire interview with Dr. John Vervaeke, but I was intrigued by what you said about the crucial role that faith plays in epistemology. And you talked about a pluralistic society, and St. Clement of Alexandria lived in a time similar to ours in terms of society had not been yet Christianized. And I would say that our current society is not very Christian in its overall ethos. So what I want to ask you, this actually comes from a pastoral point of view. You sort of applied St. Clement's thinking to skepticism, what about applying it to like postmodernism, which exists in our current society, even in an unspoken way? I'm thinking in particular about the idea of deconstruction. This is a term I hear all the time. I've actually heard it from people who are Orthodox who want to, quote unquote, deconstruct their faith. And in terms of the application of faith to this problem, so people who, for example, might say, you know, why am I Orthodox? Well, I'm Greek and I was born into the church, and they start to deconstruct it and say it was just cultural. It's not because the Orthodox Church is true, it's just my culture. Or somebody who converts and says, well, I was in a bad psychological state, I was desperate, I was confused. After becoming Orthodox, I've gotten therapy, and now I'm in a better mental state, and I see that, you know, there really is no proof of God, there really is no afterlife, and so I've moved beyond that. So political, social, psychological, cultural reasons in terms of people deconstructing their faith and trying to, you know, figure out why am I Orthodox, and, you know, is the Orthodox Church really true in the face of, you know, secularism, for example? How would you apply St. Clement's, you know, idea of faith to that? I very much agree with what you say. I mean, it's something that even people who are secular, who have no belief in God or no belief in the afterlife or anything like that, faith is inescapable. You can't, by definition, you can't know everything, you can't prove everything.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, at root, there are certain things in which you have faith, whether or not you realize that. You just accept them as axiomatic, as you can't demonstrate them, and you just live your life that way. A lot of people aren't aware of that. But how would you apply this idea of faith being crucial to our knowledge? How do I know that I converted to the Orthodox Church for the right reasons? How do I know that the church is true? You understand my question?
Yeah, well, first of all, postmodernism is a form of skepticism.
Which is what I assumed.
Right, so all of the arguments that are against skepticism in general would apply to postmodernism in particular. You know, and it's part of the same intellectual history that we can trace from Descartes to Hume to Kant to, you know, Nietzsche, modern, and then modern postmodern, contemporary postmodernism. What are they're coming up with these terms, meta postmodernism or whatever.
Mod posterism.
Say that again?
Mod posterism.
Is that a real word?
Just invented it.
For lack of a better word.
And there's posthumanism.
Oh, that's another
Oh
one.
yes, so
Oh.
that yes.
Oh, absolutely.
No, so the, like I say, there's these are all deconstructionist philosophies. Postmodernism is deconstructionist, and in that sense, it is destructive. And insofar it is destructive of the good, like an attack on the church, well, then it's bad. There is a certain utility, I believe, in some aspects of postmodernism in its deconstructive mode, insofar as it can assist some people to deconstruct the errors of modernism, deconstruct a materialist worldview. Because if applied honestly, postmodernism will deconstruct scientism and materialism. Now, it's not always applied that way, but some people are perceptive, and they will start to realize, and it's easier to, I think there is a tendency now for people to realize when they look at the world that we live in, created by modernism, and the things that go along with modernism, the promises of modernism, you know, basically the progress of science, capitalism as the way to better living, and you know, a whole number of ideas that in current conditions increasingly seem to be hollow for many people, which makes people start to question whether this really is the truth. Postmodernism, although I believe it's basically negative in character, and certainly in some of its primary expositors. I'm thinking Foucault, who Chomsky said was the most amoral person I've ever met. Chomsky being a modernist, right?
No.
Not a postmodernist.
No.
What I have in mind, though, is that, I mean, that's filtered down to the popular level, and just at the popular level, people don't even necessarily know the concepts behind postmodernism, and I
No,
would say,
people, it filters down, and people get it in a diluted way, and it turns into, you know, all these forms of relativism, basically subjectivism, and you know, which in itself can go back to Descartes. With, not that people know that, but it is percolated through the culture. I think I think an idea that we can push, that people can actually comprehend, that is explicit in Clement, and which, you know, some philosophers today are making, is that all knowledge and all belief has presuppositions to it, and you can't have science without presuppositions. You can't have knowledge without presuppositions. You can't have any interaction with the world. Anything you want to do, whether you think it's invented or not, whether whether the meaning that you're ascribing to yourself is a self-invention or not, it doesn't matter how you frame it. Any way you frame it, you have to have presuppositions. And those presuppositions by which you will act, even if you may claim that you don't actually believe them, which is just hypocrisy or performative contradiction, those are going to be the elements of faith that Clement talks about. They're going to be a belief in reality. They're going to be a belief in the existence of other people that are like us, and everything that follows from that, you know, human nature and human relations and the morality that proceeds from that. It's going to be a belief in truth, that there is such a thing as truth, that we can know truth, that we can discern truth from falsehood, that we can, that you know, we can, that some things are better than others, right? Which is the morality at its most basic level. Some things are better than others. Some actions are better than other actions. You know, and you can start out with that on a purely secular level. You know, I choose to drink that instead of that. You know, it's just the most basic actions of any being, and from that that's undeniable. Everybody accepts it. But as soon as you go into that realm of preference and choice, you establish a value hierarchy, and as soon as you do that, then you're in the realm of morality, and and everybody uses moral language, even if they deny that there's substance to it. But the denial of the substance to it is entirely hypocritical, because they all actually have preferences, and they all actually have a value hierarchy. So those are ideas that you can hammer down onto people, that show that there really is truth, there really is goodness, there really is morality, there really is an external world, which means that things really do matter, because things are real, and the way that we interact with people and the results of those interactions are real. That all of those things are are ideas that everybody either believes consciously or accepts unconsciously, or at least acts as if they believe, even if they claim that they don't. Or at the very least, they want everyone else to act as if they believe it. I think that is where Clement can be so useful to us, to establish a base. Certainly, the base, and this is an important base in a time when everything is being questioned. There's no topic that's off limit nowadays. If you look online, everything is fair game. Like the craziest ideas things that were completely taboo a few years ago, it's all out there in the open, and everybody is questioning everything.
Which is what I encounter in my past.
Right, everybody is
Yeah,
questioning
yeah.
everything, and to a great extent that is destructive, right? Insofar as a person is having, as that results in doubts for people's faith, right? I mean, we want people to doubt some things, right? Some things about the way the secular world is, that we want people to have questions about that because there's things that are genuinely wrong. We don't want people to doubt the faith. We do. There's nothing wrong with people investigating the faith more deeply in order to understand things, but to do so with a pious spirit.
I would have just a short comment on the very good, very interesting question that His Grace posed to Father Patapios regarding the possible Thomistic reading of apophatic theology in Clement of Alexandria. So I think that we can be bold in saying that, yeah, there is something intrinsic in Clement apophatic theology which precludes Thomistic reading or Thomistic version of negative theology or apophatic theology. And since your Grace, you mentioned Saint Dionysius of Areopagita, I think it's one of those rare moments in church history, which is like very deeply paradoxical thing that happened regarding the role of Saint Dionysius in development of Eastern concept of apophatic theology and the Western concept of apophatic theology. So what happened, as I remember from my old reading, Thomas Aquinas, in reality, Saint Dionysius is the second most used source in Thomas theology. So Aquinas, the most citing source is the Holy Scripture, and the second most citing source is Saint Dionysius.
No, the second is Augustine. Apart from Holy Scripture, I think it's Augustine.
That's correct. Yeah.
Then
Or maybe, yeah, I remember I got it from Western source.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so this information. I cannot recall if it was just in a particular part of Thomas theology, that the second most cited source is Dionysius. And what he did, as your Grace mentioned, he not only that, I think you cannot call it misinterpretation. It's something much higher. And as in my understanding, we can illustrate in following way. So if you follow Saint Dionysius on his ascent towards the negative theology, in the end, you have to remove the predicate of being from God.
Yeah.
You have to get the point when you have to say that God is not, God doesn't exist. Yeah. If we use being as we have it, if word exists, God doesn't exist. And then he goes on to say that non-being is one of the names that we can put to God. And also there is this interpretation that is really creatio ex nihilo is not creatio ex nihilo, it's creatio from God, because nihil non-being.
That's Eric Pearl's exposition of it.
Yes.
Extale,
But then, if you read Thomas Aquinas' comments on Saint Dionysius, this is the point where he radically disagrees with Saint Dionysius. He says, Thomas Aquinas, in the context of his theology, in the context of his analogy of being, that of course we cannot remove the predicate of being from God. No. We cannot do that. It would mean that we deny the existence of God. So in this context, we can see that his negative theology isn't what we used to have in the East as negative theology. Negative theology is just a correction to affirmative theology or to via eminentia. But there is no negative theology as we understand it. And it's really something very striking that in order to elaborate or to develop, to produce this Western understanding of negative theology, Aquinas turned to Saint Dionysius in order to say the exact opposite of what Saint Dionysius teaches, and Aquinas goes in great length, like to find all those places where Saint Dionysius says you have to remove this predicate from God, and he tries to find an interpretation which says just the opposite. That like it looks, that he wants to remove the predicate of being from God, but of course he cannot do that because it would be denial of divine existence. And I think that if we take that Saint Dionysius is later than Clement, we are not sure about where to put on the historical timeline the person and the treatises of Saint Dionysius. So still, I think that Saint Dionysius, Clement, he had two sources in his effort to elaborate the early concept of negative theology, and is the biblical source and Greek philosophy. And in my reading, in my like amateur reading of Greek philosophy, there is intrinsic dimension of apophatism in Greek theology, which disappeared from Western scholastic interpretation of Greek philosophy because of the way how they got to use Aristotle. In this. So I think that there is something, Platonic tradition, Epicurus Usias. So you have to remove being from this ultimate source of being. Otherwise, the whole ontology is destroyed. So there is both in biblical tradition, there is this tradition or this concept of negative theology, but also even in the Greek philosophical tradition.
Well, if I interject, Plotinus removes being from the one. I mean, the one doesn't exist.
And I think that Thomas Aquinas, like his reading of biblical tradition, is radically different. We can see it, how he, like, what violence he, he put on text of Saint Dionysius, and the same in the same sense, his reading of Greek philosophy is radically westernized or scholastic reading, and there is no understanding of this intrinsic concept of apophatism in Greek philosophy.
I completely thank you, Father. I entirely agree with you. I would say, in order to give the Thomistic response to that, as it were, which I do believe is forced. Thomas tries to explain this through the notion of analogy, which it seems to me a little bit like wanting to have your cake and eat it too, whereby he's there's univocal language and there's equivocal language, and the univocal language is saying that the words that we apply to one thing are applied in the same way to another thing. And so Duns Scotus, for example, said that when we say the being of God, we mean it univocally, but there's this in the same way that we mean being when we are talking about ourselves. And he says that this is necessary. Otherwise, how would we know what we're talking about if we're not using the word in the same way? Right? That's not a totally illogical idea, right? It's rationalistic, but it makes some sense. And then you have the equivocal way of speaking about things, where you're just using the same words but with totally different meanings, that are not necessarily intrinsically related one to another. Saint John of Damascus in his philosophical chapters gives the example of the dog, which can refer to the four-footed animal, but it can also refer to a certain type of shark.
Oh, right.
But that, I can say, so Thomas would accuse us of using equivocal language about God, right? Because we're saying that our language about God doesn't actually express any true proposition about being, that therefore it must be equivocal, and if it's equivocal, then it has no intrinsic relation, and then how do we know that it has any meaning at all? It would be the same thing to say God exists as to say God doesn't exist, or to say that God is good as to say that God is bad.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he misunderstands what the Orthodox language is doing, because I believe that the best way to explain the patristic language here, which could be called equivocal, but which would better be called anagogical.
Yeah.
I think anagogy is the correct Orthodox way to look at this, maybe better than analogy.
Mm-hmm.
Thomas proposes analogy as a kind of middle way, by which the words are used to refer to God. They genuinely have the reference of God, but the way that they are employed is by a different mode. It is by a proportional mode, analogia. So the idea here is that when we say God's being, we don't mean God's being in the same sense as we mean our being, or when we say God's goodness, we don't mean it in the same sense as our goodness. We mean it in some infinitely surpassing way, but which nevertheless has some kind of real connection or real referent. And so Aquinas, when he's interpreting these very apophatic statements of Dionysius and whoever else he might come across, of the Eastern Fathers that are going to use this type of language, which is most of them, he is going to, from our point of view, explain it away by saying that when Dionysius says, God is beyond being, or God is, beyond non-being, that God exists and that he doesn't exist, but he also does not exist and not exist. All of these things. He says that that this by the analogical mode of expression is referring to God's being by a different mode, by the mode of infinity, and not by the mode of our creaturely finitude. So we can use this kind of language to speak about God analogically by way of infinity, but not in the absolute sense, right? I say, so he is explaining it away, as far as I'm concerned, and I think as far as you're concerned, he's explaining it away. But it's not, I wouldn't say that his explanation is ridiculous. It's it's a little bit dishonest, maybe, certainly unfaithful to the intent of the author, by which he basically can nullify the entire Eastern tradition of the Church, which was, the center of all theology in the ancient for the fathers. But it's, there's, like I say, there's difficulties with analogy here, because it seems to me that you have to, like I say, you can't prove that God is the referent of this. You have to posit it, I believe. And so ultimately you're being forced into Thomas is being forced, and I don't think he ever recognizes this consciously, but he's being forced into a kind of a circular logic where he has to posit that God is the referent. He cannot prove that God is the referent, because to prove that God was the referent would involve a form of circular logic, because in order to prove it you have to posit it, and that therefore, insofar as he does that, he is really falling into some of the same of what he criticizes us for doing when we use our language of, God beyond being and so forth.
So if I could comment on it, as I see it, of course, regarding the analogy of being, I think there is and there is not analogy of being, as I understand the patristic, mainly the Greek patristic tradition. So there is not analogy of being as scholastic tradition sees it, that you have created being, you have uncreated God, and you said that there is an analogy, there is a similarity between this created being and uncreated being. So in this sense, I think that's wrong analogy of being.
No, he doesn't say it that way.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. But
Yes, but there, and of course, it has also something to do with the understanding of natural, supernatural, and that's why it's so complicated to move from Eastern and Western understanding, because we have very different understandings. So as I see scholastic tradition, you have created nature and you have super later added grace.
But I think
and they take that there is an analogy of being, this created being. There is something similar. There is some analogy with uncreated being of God, which I think is wrong. Now, if we go to Eastern concept, then we don't have this distinction, nature, supernatural, as Dr. John mentioned, to theon. So the human nature consists of both of created and uncreated. Uncreated divine being to theon is the natural part of human being. So if you look at the human nature of a man, so he consists of what makes him to be in the image of God, as St. Gregory of Nyssa teaches, so that the content of his nature is uncreated, is the divine uncreated being. So from this point of view, you can speak about analogy of being, which is the result of divine immanence in God. But then it depends, in my understanding, it depends how you use being. But since, because of different understanding of nature in scholastic tradition, nature, supernatural, so if you take just nature, created being, there is no analogy with divine being. So that's my
I think there's 2 points I want to make there. One is, I think that to be fair to Aquinas, or at least the modern interpreters of Aquinas, who are maybe trying to deal with the Orthodox criticism here, they seem to be saying, or Thomas seems to be saying, that when we use analogy of being between creatures and God, there is in fact no similarity. It is the language is human language based on human concepts, and it is self developing. The mode is human language. It's just that the referent is God. I think that's their more considered explanation of analogy, rather than maybe a cruder version of analogy where it's levels of similarity. So because I don't want to strawman the Thomistic position, it's a serious position, right? Not to mention that it's And
I would just agree here. I only later discovered that Thomas Aquinas, his theology much deeper than the later, like a vulgarized, simplified version, that constitutes the core of Thomistic tradition. So that in Thomas it's more complicated. I would agree.
The second thing is, with regards to analogy, and I actually wrote this down on one of my questions. I wasn't sure if we were going to be able to get into this, but you raised it. In connection with this, which is the analogy of being may be problematic if we deny that God is being. But perhaps there is a place, and I've seen this mentioned by some Orthodox authors, of the idea of analogy of energy. Now, so then that gets into the questions of if we say that God is good, right? Saint Gregory Palamas tells us that goodness is an energy of God,
right?
All of the things that we understand to be properties of God are energies of God. They are activities of God.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I forget if is it Saint Gregory Palamas or is it Philotheos Kokkinos or Kallistos Xanthopoulos, who actually says, in this context, we can say that God is pure act. He accepts that one of those three, I don't remember which one, but a saint of that group, the Hesychast group, they explicitly say we can accept that God is pure act, but not in the sense of that God's energy is identical to his essence.
No.
In the sense that that all of his attributes or properties are fully actualized in the sense of being completely perfect, right? There's no lack in them, because there's the Thomistic criticism that if there is potentiality, then there is a lack.
Yes.
Right? There's something that's not there yet. So, and particularly if it's in relationship, if that potentiality is in relationship to a creature, then the idea is that for God to become fully actualized, he needs the creature, which means that God plus creature is greater than just God.
Oh dear.
Right? These are the Thomistic arguments, which we have to take seriously, right?
Yeah, I think we have to.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we
I
have
agree,
to. These, like I say, these are.
Oh sure.
It's not something to be ridiculed.
No.
But if we were to, I don't know, what do you think, Father, about the idea of analogy of energy, and if there were such a thing, how would we understand that on two sides? On the one side of, with respect to Dionysian language, as, let's say, as being anagogical, and on the other side, with respect to the energies themselves as, or the energies in any way apprehensible. That was, you saw my little note the other day that I put, if commenting on Saint Maximus in my private reading, if we cannot say that God is apprehensible in the intellectual sense, in other words, we cannot understand God,
Right.
because that would limit him, that would circumscribe God. But then how can we participate in God via his energies? Why doesn't participation circumscribe God if apprehension does? So that question would be directly related to the understanding of the energies. If we're understanding the energies by analogy, in other words, by which our language in reference to the energies is truly analogical and not anagogical. Does that make sense, Father?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I am following you fully. I would just say something that I asked yesterday, Father Patapios, this question, that I think if we read different presentation or different explanation of the essence energy distinctions, I think it's fair to say that it wouldn't be rare that this presentation wouldn't withstand the critique of Thomistic tradition for right reasons. So I think that there is among Orthodox or in Orthodox tradition, modern Orthodox tradition, there are circulated some simplified version, I would say distorted version of essence energy distinctions.
I agree.
Yeah. So I think that, and based on that, I think that I see it because I have to teach it in our class of dogmatic theology. And if you follow students, how they react for the first time, when they presented with this difficult concept. So usually, they would, because they have good faith, they want to embrace it. They say, of course, it's like hallmark of orthodoxy, but then very very quickly they would create like simplified, very distorted version of essence energy distinction, which wouldn't withstand, like a serious critique from Thomistic tradition. So, and I think that in this context, that we have also that then it entails like not exactly orthodox understanding of the creation, how creation is is related to God through divine energies. So, but,
I agree.
Yeah.
You didn't answer my question. but
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody
So
can
I think that
answer,
there is
answer my question.
Yeah, the critique that you mentioned of Actus Purus, I think we have to take it very seriously. Yeah, because otherwise, that if we have this distorted understanding, or not distorted, like simplified understanding, essence and distinction, it's ditheism. It introduces
Yeah.
It's
the
that, yes,
real-
yes, of
and
course,
it-
of course.
And it
Yeah.
just, the cheap way how to resolve very deep challenge of how you understand the relationship between God and the world that became in time.
Well, I think Saint Gregory Palamas, I think it's not impious to state that Saint Gregory Palamas is sometimes imprecise in his language, because he's struggling to express things that can't be expressed, right? And I think when he uses when he says it in a couple places that the diaphora is pragmatiki, or kata to pragma, which will freak a Thomist out, right? That's ditheism. All of the other hesychasts, they drew back from that notion, and that's why you see the hesychastic theology as is expressed, by the successors of Saint Gregory. In other words, by Saint Callistos and Saint Philotheos, by the Emperor John Cantacuzene, who's not a saint, but who was a serious thinker, and by others, by Gennadios Scholaris. Their questions they all veer away from the pragmatiki diaphora, and they're asking, is it katepinian?
You mean,
And
so you mean a real distinction?
is that they all avoid the language of real distinction,
I see.
and they start saying, is it katepinian? Is it a conceptual distinction? And then they make a distinction between katepinian and katatheorian. They say it's not katatheorian, it's katepinian, and then there was a whole tendency to assume, and this was assumed at the Council of Florence. There's some very good scholarship on this, by the way, that's just recently come out. I can recommend to you all. That it was assumed by everybody at the Council of Florence that the Palamite view, or the Orthodox view on this, was functionally equivalent to the Franciscan view of the idea of a formal distinction. Now, whether that's true in fact is another question. But everybody assumed it. The Orthodox assumed it, the Franciscans assumed it, and the Thomists assumed it. And that's why there was a kind of alliance between the Franciscans and the Orthodox that got squashed by the Thomists at the Council of Florence because the Pope was a Thomist. But that was also why the Pope didn't push the issue at the Council of Florence, because he was afraid it was going to cause a schism in the West between the Dominicans and the Franciscans, who already didn't get along very well, in which the Franciscans would take the Orthodox side. So that was.
What do you make of Romanili's view that it is a real distinction?
I don't like that language. I think it moves in the wrong direction, as Father said. It opens us up to criticism.
Yeah, I would say in this sense that really there is something not ideal in Vladimir Lossky's presentation of essence energy distinction. That it
That's what you were saying yesterday, right? And I agree with you. I agree, Father.
Then, we have this concept as energy distinction in order to secure for the real presence, for the real immanence of God in the world, and at the same time to prevent us from falling into trap of pantheism. But then, if you understand it wrongly, then that's not real presence of God at all. If you have, I don't say that Vladimir Lossky does it, but very easily you can, you have to be protected from divine essence, whatever it is. That's why we came out with this energy, because we want to have God really present, but we don't want him to be present through essence. So then, we are introducing the real distinction, like division, not distinction, but more
division. It goes towards division. Yes.
We are giving up on apophatic apophatic tradition, that we should be more careful. Yeah, like if you strongly assert that there is a like real distinction, division, yeah, then I
So
think that there is
Romanidis is
from
a
time to
little,
time, I would say, like we need Thomistic background in order to have.
But to keep us in line.
Yeah.
It was in line. So what do you think, Father?
so Romanidis is not totally accurate then in his presentation.
He pushes. He was a trailblazer. I think he overemphasized some of these differences for the purpose of getting ideas across to people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
simplified. In order to present an idea to a large audience, you have to simplify, as you know, as you said.
And as you said yesterday, theology in making. So in some sense, 40s, 50s, 60s of last century, it was new beginning for Orthodox theology because we were so westernized that we forgot everything.
Yeah.
What we cherish in Orthodox tradition. So we needed Vladimir Losky, we needed Father Romanidis in
Yeah.
order to wake us up and say, hey guys, there are something that you cannot forget, you cannot put out. And they did it, but now we need like more refined understanding of those concepts.
So my question, to go back to it, to unite these two ideas here, if we understand God, say, oxymoron, heresy right there.
So there's no God.
If we think about God, in a proper, united way, in which God's energies, God's activity, God's relation to us, that this is not some other thing than His essence, but simply God with us.
Yes, exactly.
And so that we understand all of these as a unity, and we don't chop God up. If we have that proper Orthodox understanding, which I do believe, despite the vagaries of language, the Hesychast Fathers were striving to preserve. How then do we relate it to the question of language in the Dionysian sense? In other words, what of our language in the Dionysian sense is pure apophaticism, which anything that we say about the divine essence is apophaticism in the absolute sense of we're not saying anything at all. And how much of that would be, we're speaking about the energies, and if we're speaking about the energies, is any of our language about the energies in the absolute sense not pure apophaticism in the same sense as it is with respect to God's essence?
So as I would respond to it, to try thinking or following your thread of thought. So I would say that since energies aren't lesser God than essence, it's the same God. So you can say it's divine essence as it is approachable or present to us. And then I would make distinction between a possibility to apprehend something and then to give an account of what I apprehended. So I would, St. Gregory of Nyssa, he made this distinction that if we think about the process of apprehending created things, we can use the word I know. But once we speak about the apprehension or the knowledge of uncreated, we have to find another word, which is union. Now it's not about the knowledge. Knowledge might be applied only on the level of created things. Once we speak about uncreated things, it isn't anymore about the knowledge. You have to apply another like cognitive tool, which is the union. And then I would add something that I found that I find every time when I think about from St. Gregory from St. Gregory Palamas in his concept of that God is αυτονόητος. The God is Dr. John, how can we?
Self-intelligible.
Yes,
Self-intelligible.
Yeah,
autonoitos,
yeah.
self-intelligible. So it means when he describes, or when he explains, or not explains, when he describes the experience of his fellow monks and his own experience, he uses this adjective autonoitos. So when he says that once you reach, when someone reaches the point of union with God, then it is God Himself who is God who is apprehending Himself through the deified one. And then it is this is the Saint Maximus' defense of the one energy in Saint Dionysius. Then my own energy of my own act of apprehending something is one with the God's act of apprehending Himself, and I just participate in it.
Which is why he says mia energia ton agion.
Yeah. So in this sense, we can achieve it, and you cannot say that God is apprehending only His own energies but not His essence. Yeah? It's God's act of apprehending Himself, because God is autonoitos. Yeah, He apprehends Himself, and He is doing it through you. Yeah, now His energy is your own energy. There's one energy, of God and the saint. But then when it is finished, then you have problem how to speak about it.
Thank you, Father, and I think we have to end there.
Yeah.
And Father, that was, I believe, the explanation you just gave is true, orthodox, correct, the best answer that could be given. There's more to dig into there, which I hope that we will be able to continue this conversation in the future, which has strayed a little bit from Clement, but
He's a springboard for it.
but this is that's the whole point of us getting together to talk.
Clement wanted to say these things.
Yeah.
Clement would have approved.
He would have approved it.
He would have
been happy
approved
with
it.
having this conversation, I think.
So thank
yeah.
you, everyone who's participated
Thank
in
you.
this.
Yeah.
Thank you, Father Gregory, for making the impetus for this. Thank you,
Well,
John,
it's
for
all three of us.
pushing
The Clementines.
pushing me into Rome circuitously through Alexandria. Thank you, Father, for coordinating this. Thank you, Father, for presenting His Holiness, and
This really presents us as a research facility
Yes.
as much as a teaching
Absolutely.
facility.
It's very important.
and has given us homework.
Homework, yeah, that's right.
So-
Let me jump in for last time. I would like to thank you, Your Grace, and all fathers. And shame on me that I wasn't able to take part to accompany you, because it's something that exceeded my possibilities. But I very much enjoyed it, and I'm very happy for our institution, for St. Photios School, that whoever came up with this idea. And I only pray with all my heart that God give us strength and to see it only as a first colloquium in line.
Yes,
So,
yes.
Thank
yes,
you so much.
yes.
I mean,
Thank you for that.
Amen.